William and Spencer knew each other since university, when they studied together at the physics and technology faculty. At that time, the guys were obsessed with science and dreamed of pursuing careers as great scientists. Teachers praised these highly capable students who seemed like siblings. After graduating, William and Spence found themselves at a crossroads, where there were two paths. The young men understood that their future depended on the choice they made. On one hand, graduates with certain skills could continue studying sciences. On the other hand, they could independently navigate the world of business and commerce. It's not known why the young men preferred the second option, but thanks to that choice, they embarked on the path of wealth and success. Unconsciously, the newly graduates chose the most promising business option, focused on selling and implementing computer technology in many areas of daily life. Starting from scratch as small resellers of used computers, William and Spencer became entrepreneurs and owners of an extensive network of stores specializing in household appliances and office supplies. This is probably a clear example of the result of sacrificing their scientific education to achieve happiness and prosperity through business. Due to their business pursuits, William and Spencer gave up pursuing their scientific training but gained freedom and financial independence. There was never disagreement or friction between the young entrepreneurs. The boys understood each other perfectly and honestly shared their profits. When the young entrepreneurs set everything in order, almost simultaneously, they found wives and started a family. Spencer had a daughter, Sydney, and William had a son, Micon. As the businessmen lived close to each other, their children were friends from childhood. Playing on the lawn in front of the house, the children delighted their parents who adored them. Time passed, and William and Spencer's families maintained their friendship. When Michael and Sydney grew up and graduated from high school, their parents sent them to study in Europe. It turned out that the young ones attended different institutions, so they could only see each other during vacations. In college, Michael became very interested in basketball and even became a member of the university basketball team. On the other hand, Sydney dedicated herself to rhythmic gymnastics. During their studies, the young ones changed a lot, both physically and internally. This did not go unnoticed by their parents. In the third year, Micon became a handsome man, 2 meters tall, and Sydney became the winner of the university's beauty contests. It was evident that the couple had aged. Spencer liked to say in these cases, looking mischievously at William, although the young ones denied it themselves, fate had already been written, and it was clear that they ended up together. If their parents hadn't been so close on a family level, Micon and Sydney would have already been together, but as it wasn't like that, neither for William nor for Spencer, that option was no longer correct. The entrepreneurs wanted their children to get married and finish consolidating their relationship with children. Each one thought their child was right for the other. To speed up this process, the caring parents invited Michael and Sydney to a guest house they built for them by the lake. It even had a dock and a small beach covered with small stones and sand. And while they wondered why their parents had invited them to that place, the young ones swam, sunbathed, and played on the beach. At some point, Micon suggested that Sydney take a boat and cross to the opposite shore, as it seemed that no one had stepped there for a long time. The young woman agreed, and Micon grabbed the oars, and the small boat quickly glided across the blue surface of the lake. When they reached the middle of the lake, the boy involuntarily let go of the oars and admired the view before him, without hiding his admiration. Sydney smiled and took her cell phone out of her pocket to take a selfie with Micon. At that moment, the young ones wanted to choose a good angle. They got very close, and to their surprise, they shyly kissed each other. At first, it seemed like an accident, but when the kiss was repeated, Micon and Sydney realized that they had been in love with each other for a long time. After that memorable encounter at the lake, the young ones started seeing each other almost daily, which made their parents incredibly happy. About 6 months later, Michael proposed to Sydney at the same lake house. Of course, yes, love, the young woman exclaimed with joy and threw herself into her boyfriend's arms. Probably for the parents of both, this was the most pleasant news in years. On the occasion of Michael and Sydney's engagement, they decided to organize a party in the middle of the ocean. As the rented yacht, the weather was fine and sunny, which made the event even more pleasant and cheerful. Unlike their parents, the young ones wore beach clothes because they intended to swim in the coastal waters for a while. The party was in full swing when Michelle, at the request of one of the guests, went to the cellar to bring a bottle of champagne. Hurrying to fulfill the order, the young man supported his foot awkwardly on the wet deck, landing on a wooden platform with an impact. Maikon immediately felt a slight snap, and a flash of sharp pain hit his lower back. Unfortunately, in the fervor of the celebration, the boy's absence was not immediately noticed. When Sydney went looking for her boyfriend, she saw him lying on the wet deck. The young man clung to his arms helplessly, trying desperately to get up. At the same time, Maikon didn't realize that his legs weren't moving. "Darling, what happened? Are you hurt?" exclaimed Sydney and ran to the boy. A little later, a crowd of people gathered on the deck to look at the boyfriend with pity, writhing in pain and unable to get up. I'm realizing the seriousness of the situation. Spencer immediately went to the shore where an ambulance was called by William, who was already waiting for them, as Maikon apparently had a spine injury and had to be transported very carefully. But despite the efforts, the boy had to endure a lot of pain before finally being taken to the hospital. At first, Michelle looked hopefully into the eyes of the doctors, trying to see some hope in them. Then, when the young man found out he had a compression fracture in his spine, everything fell into place. Maikon, who was an athlete in the past, understood well what those fateful words meant. "My God, now I'm going to be disabled in a wheelchair for the rest of my days," he thought, desperately trying not to cry. During the visiting hours with his parents and Sydney, Maikon transformed himself, hiding the pain and fear behind a mask of friendliness and nonchalance. But as soon as the relatives left the room, the young man plunged back into the abyss of sadness and despair. Time passed, but Maikon's disabled body showed no improvement. Additionally, he was tormented by the pain of pressure ulcers formed due to prolonged body positioning. Of course, Sydney supported her beloved and even learned to massage his muscles to stretch his legs and move them. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. At some point, Maikon, suffering from terrible depression, came up with the idea that it was worth telling Sydney that she was now free and that their engagement was canceled. To the young man, it seemed like his girlfriend was sad because of his current disability, which apparently would be for life. "Sydney, I wanted to tell you that I don't want you to stay here as a prisoner. You can live your life as you want. I'm a person with a disability who will be forever confined to a wheelchair. I guess I never dreamed of a life like this," said Maikon, trying to calm the tremor in his voice. Initially, Sydney thought she had misunderstood, but later, when she understood the meaning of those words, she covered her face with her hands and began to cry. "All this time I was with Maikon, sharing his pain, and now he only thinks about getting rid of me as soon as possible," Sydney thought as she sobbed. She felt humiliated, insulted, and without saying a word, the young woman, with tears in her eyes, left the room and quickly headed for the exit. At that moment, biting his lips in despair, Maikon cursed himself for the foolish words that hurt the heart of his beloved. But the true pain the young man experienced was the next day when Sydney, for the first time in weeks, didn't come to visit him. It was then that Maikon realized what he had done. Trying to find a way to fix the problem, the young man asked his parents to bring him a laptop, now that he had a lot of free time. Maikon searched for directions to clinics specialized in treating musculoskeletal injuries. He spent 5 days trying to find a good medical center in New York where specialized neurosurgeons could help him. But before deciding on such an important step, the young man prepared himself, called Sydney, and said, "I'm sorry, I was a fool. Just tell me one thing. Will you agree to marry me, no matter what happens?" Of course, yes, even if you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your days. After the young woman's response, tears welled up in Michael's eyes, caused by a warm feeling of love and tenderness for his fiancée. Before leaving for New York, Michael insisted that Sydney decide on the exact day of the wedding. The young man wanted to keep in his soul the thought of something good and cheerful before a complicated operation, as Michael's body had to be horizontal all the time. There were some difficulties with his transport to New York. The young man was 2 meters tall, so his parents had to work wonders of ingenuity to make a special bed for their son to go. Before going to the clinic, Sydney gave Michael a deep kiss and announced the wedding day. The young man smiled and felt a great wave of gratitude from his girlfriend and parents. The operation performed on Micon, in one of the best clinics in the United States and the world, lasted about 12 hours, and according to the doctors, it was a total success. Although it was still too early to speak of a great triumph, a month of rehabilitation awaited him. Initially, Micon could move his right big toe, but later, training tirelessly, he achieved surprising results. Step by step, the young man began to rise, and one beautiful day, he did it. When he returned to his hometown, Micon could already walk with the support of a cane. Sydney had no idea about anything. The young man wanted to surprise the bride at the wedding, which was supposed to happen in 3 days. That's why Micon didn't reveal the exact date of his arrival. But when a black vehicle stopped at Sydney's house, the young woman understood what was happening. She ran to the car doors, thinking that Micon might need help. What a surprise for the young woman when her boyfriend got out of the car on his own and, leaving his cane behind, enveloped the bride in a big hug. "I love you so much, Sydney," whispered Micon, feeling tears rolling down his face. The young man knew that his fiancée felt the same because all these days she couldn't stop being nervous, worried, and sleepless. "We will never be apart again. Are you listening to me?" said Sydney, snuggling into the broad chest of the young man. The young couple hugged for a while and then entered the house. Micon and Sydney knew they couldn't waste time. They had a life together ahead that they should start the moment they got married. My friends, here ends our story for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. A big hug, and see you later, folks.